Welcome to another episode of Confessions of a CRA. And today we have another amazing guest, Jeannie Farnsworth. I'm so excited to have her join us here today and share her story. She has over 20 years of clinical research experience, and she has done lots of different things, not just monitoring, but she's taken her career from a study coordinator, starting out as a pharmacy tech study coordinator into the CRA role and beyond. She's held a consulting agency, correct? You owned your own consulting company, and you also are the director for SOCRA. And I mean, she just has so many wonderful, nuggets, diamonds, tips, whatever you want to call it, to share with us today. So I'm so excited to, bring her story to you. So thank you so much, Jeannie, for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be able to spend some time with you and to reach out anyone who can benefit from my words.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. So, let's go ahead and jump right in. We were kind of just chatting earlier about, some of the things that have happened throughout your career and what brought you to the CRA role. So, or the industry in general. So share with us, I feel like it's appropriate to maybe start with your education. And, since you're one of those people that originally wanted to go to medical school, I was too, by the way. That was my original path. And then I very quickly realized that it was not going in that direction anymore.
Yes, I hear what you're saying. And so I think as a little girl, you realize I can be a teacher or I can go into medicine. And so I knew that I didn't want to be a nurse. My sister knew she wanted to be a nurse, and she is a nurse. So I thought being a doctor was the only way to help people. And I didn't have a lot of money. And as I would apply, I didn't get in. And then the second time I didn't get in, I just kind of thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? I feel like I'm wasting time. And at that time I was working as a pharmacy technician / research assistant. I was brought on from kind of the main hospital into the specialty unit called investigational research, because they said that I had great attention to detail and that I had a good memory. And I remember thinking that was like a funny thing to say, because I was like, well, what makes that special? And my PI and my manager, they would say, you remember all these little exceptions. You remember that footnote J. And so I always call it footnote J. I do remember the footnotes, and I do remember the exceptions. And I kind of like doing something different. It was not standard of care. It was standard of care with a twist. And so it was this thing called research. And so when I didn't get in that second time, that third time, I was invited to sign up for this master's program. So my basic education was a biology and biochemistry major with a business administration minor. I knew that I wanted to have a business somehow, some way that no matter what I did, I could use some of the things that they taught in college to whatever business I would have in the future. And I think that that's paid off a lot. But this master's degree was out of Harvard Med School. It was for clinical investigations. It was for non-physicians, cater for trying to bring out researchers and to expose them to more than just bench research. And so it just came at a perfect time for me, just because I was working in it, but I was just this research assistant compounding medications. And it opened my eyes to how research was done outside of the US, which I thought was cool, because I had no idea how healthcare was so different in other countries. And so I had fellow students from Japan and Africa and Europe. And I just was blown away with how healthcare worked and how research worked in their countries. And so, like I say, I fell into it. I got lucky that it worked out for me. I know I was meant to have this be my career. I know that program was meant for me. And every role that I've had, I was meant to move forward in that position. So you had mentioned earlier, you kind of had to go seeking after it. And I meet a lot of people. I'm also an instructor at Fast Track, and
I forgot to mention that.
Yeah. And so you have people who are intentionally seeking it out, and I just kind of think, why is it so hard to seek it out? Because I mean, it just blows my mind that it's that hard to get in. And so I think what you're doing is fantastic here.
Yes, the struggle is real, Jeannie, for most of us.
I believe it. I hear it. And I meet people every day that tell me, and I just kind of think, wow, I would never have known that, because I mean, so just to give you a quick background, I went from research assistant to CRC. And so we were at a large institution, and then I kind of went to this private clinic. Well, it wasn't private, but a smaller clinic that was just starting up. And then one of the PIs wanted to have his own private practice. So at this point, I'm married, I'm pregnant, and he says, hey, come be my manager and run this research program for me. You can set your own schedule. And for me, that was music to my ears because I was going to be this new mom, and a schedule was more important than the money aspect of it. I really wanted my own schedule. And again, everything was meant to be. And so for the next 11 years, I worked for him and built up my own company and consulted for 6 other physicians and practices, and was able to work mostly part-time while raising 4 kids, and just had a great time teaching sites how to be the best. I managed a lot of their regulatory in the background, QA'd their binders. So before, pandemic and technology, I mean, I really would fly out just to make sure everything was in order, or things would be FedEx back and forth.
Wow.
So it's been fun just to see the technology grow in that time. But after leaving that, I went into the CRA role. So.
Wow. So you had a strong foundation though before you went into the CRA role, which really is key. Maybe that's another reason why it wasn't as challenging for you, because you had all that great experience.
I think so. I think that because I knew, so I have to start out by saying that, my real big girl job was when I was a full-fledged CRC. It was in adult diabetes, and I had a CRA that was my best mentor. She was my coach. She became a really close friend. And even though she told me all the things I was doing wrong, she was also teaching me what to do well. And has always been my mentor even until this day. And it was just incredible because she not only guided me on the protocols we were working together on, but just in life in this world of clinical research. And so I really attribute it to her. I attribute my upbringing in, this academic institution where they really had a good training program. And so once you kind of learn those as a good foundation for a year or two, I think back and I just think 11 years I ran a business, and I think that's kind of crazy. And to do it in such a clunky way without the tech that we have today, I made it work, but it was just so fun, and to see the projects work, and not all projects work, but they move on to something better. And I remind some of the people I coach, mentor, sometimes it might be tough, but there's always answers. That didn't work. Go back to the drawing board and you figure out something better. Yes. So.
Wow, that's amazing. And so how many years were you a coordinator?
So that's a great question. So I was a coordinator from 2000 through 2006. And then my business was from 2006 to 2017. So 6 years a coordinator. And then every once in a while I had to, play coordinator if we were short-staffed, and we knew we would be. A lot of our trials, we would plan it so there was always a backup. A lot of our trials were long-term running, so multi-years. And so the visits were quarterly. So it was very easy to plan staffing ahead of time. So busy enough that we could have full staff, but then not busy enough where coverage was a little bit more difficult if everyone was out, right? So yeah.
Wow. So so you had about, I guess, 17 years, would that be right, of good quality, strong foundation experience before moving into that CRA role, right?
Yes, very site oriented. Yes.
and I'm mentioning this because I have so many people that, reach out and they just graduated, or I don't know, maybe they are a nurse, or, they're in another field, and
right.
they feel like they can just make that immediate jump into the CRA role.
Right.
And it's been done. I've met people who have
Right.
literally graduated and then gotten a CRA job. But then it's a nightmare for them because, as you know, it's just so much stuff that you have to learn. Just
Right.
industry in general things, the acronym in and of itself is like,
Yeah.
it's like a whole, it's literally its own language.
It
So
is.
that's a challenge. And then God forbid, regulatory documents, that is like,
Yes.
that's another challenge. It's just so many different pieces that you have to be knowledgeable about once you come into the CRA role. And people are like, no, I'm ready. I know I can do this because
Right.
I know you've heard it and seen it before. And they just feel like they can just jump into it. And I say, well, I always recommend that. I feel like the coordinator role and the clinical trial assistant, depending on the company, I feel like are like the two prime roles to help prepare you to be a CRA. And then, of course, an in-house CRA job. But most of the time, you have to have some type of experience before you get those.
Yeah.
So to hear you say that is refreshing because you had all of this knowledge and information and experience, real life experience that you brought to the table. And I can imagine how much of a difference it made once you got the CRA role.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I think right before I went to work for that private physician, and I was actually not pregnant at the time, I actually wanted to be a CRA because, again, that mentor CRA, she said, there's this opening, you should apply. And I went through several rounds and part of me was torn. I wanted to travel because in my mind, I was young and dumb and 20 something and thinking that, it was all travel and then no work. Right. And I went through several rounds and there was part of me just like, I'm not going to see patients ever again. It's just going to be the data about the patients, but never actually see the patients. And as I look back, I wasn't ready, even though by the time that I interviewed for that position, I had about 5 years of experience. And I think it was because I kind of thought I not only have to juggle like the travel schedule, but the demands that a sponsor and a CRO can have, right? Because there are those needs that you have to fulfill that aren't necessarily not the same as a site would for patients, but they are slightly different.
Right.
And I think that when I was a CRA, that really opened my eyes, just to see their objectives, because they do have to have a bottom line and they do have stakeholders that they're accountable to. And so it's very different that way. And I'm glad that I had all those years. And it's funny that you say 17 years. I'm like, I guess I did have 17 years before I was a CRA. I mean, sounds like such a long time. And it just has gone by so quickly. Yeah,
time flies. And I didn't even calculate the research assistant time either. Right. So at all, and not to make, to make it seem like it was all this time, but no, seriously, I know I'm going to upset some people, but it's key that you get the experience because, like you said, general practice, that's different, right, than research. And even I had to learn, because I came from the bench science world, that even bench science is totally different than clinical. Like it's all, it's so different. So regardless of, what you're bringing to the table, yes, you may be able to do the job. Yes, you may have all these beautiful, wonderful transferable skills, but it's still not going to be the same as having some real life working knowledge, working experience in one of these roles.
Yep, absolutely. And I would also say the rapport that you bring as a CRA with that experience, you can smell a CRA a mile away if they've never had site experience just by how they relay their messages and the requests that they make. If they've had that site experience, they have a lot more compassion for timing of things. It's not that easy to bring a young pediatric patient or even an adult patient for a second draw just because the weather was bad and their sample was compromised, So I think that, yes.
I've been there.
I think it's more more well-rounded when the CRA has had that background experience for sure. And, I'm on the West Coast. And so I know that our roles are not as bountiful as those living on the East Coast. And so we don't have the plethora of CTA roles, but we have a lot of sites and a lot of CRC positions out here. So a lot less biotech and pharmaceutical companies. So anyway, people get their experience where they can get them.
Yeah. And I would even, I guess, argue that maybe the site, I feel like that's the best place to start. Even though it's great if you can get coordinator and CTA experience before jumping into the, CRA role, just because then you can see how it's done at the site, then get kind of a preview on the sponsor side before you have to go all in. But just because, like you said, with the patient interaction, and then just to see how it's ran at the site, there's so many layers. And then depending on the site, if it's private, if it's one of the larger institutions, it makes a huge difference, because there might be all these SOPs that won't allow certain things to be done, within overnight, as most people, make their requests and expect them to be done. Right. And then there's staffing issues, there's site dynamics, there's,
Yes. And then, recently with all the pandemic restrictions, right? So we've worked with sites where everything worked out great, except because of the pandemic, and the institution said anyone who comes into our hospital has to be vaccinated. This is not in the US. And we didn't realize that our couriers were not vaccinated. So therefore they could not pick up all of these samples that needed to be picked up. And this poor little courier company, because it was kind of optional for their staff, and they didn't have enough staff that actually were. And so we had an issue with all those that we didn't foresee.
Wow.
And this is 2 years in, like we should have foreseen it, but we didn't. So yeah.
Wow.
You have to be flexible in this industry. That's the other thing. Be flexible and find another solution. How are we going to do it? So
wow. And I've actually I haven't heard of that. I've heard of other examples where, the vaccination was an issue, but not with the couriers. Wow.
Courier. Yep.
Wow. But yes, you're right. That's another great point. You have to be super flexible. Because you might have planned to work on one thing for the day, for example, but there's always some type of fire to put out.
Yep.
And so you have to be prepared, open, and ready to kind of switch gears at a moment's notice. And if you don't have that experience, it's hard, right?
Yeah. But that's also what makes it fun, though, too, because it's like another problem that we get to solve, right? And so exactly. I wasn't planning on it, but then you're able to solve it. Like that's why I'm here. I mean, there's so many indications. There's so many novel ways to treat that it's just mind blowing. Some of these techniques.
It is. It's so many things. It's like so many small industries, micro industries within the industry, as I like to say.
Yes.
So it's like never ending. And that is the beauty of it, right? Is that there's so many, your day, any one single day is not going to look, you might even be doing the same thing. Maybe you're entering data for the day or reviewing, the ISF or the TMF or whatever, but it's still going to look different. Just because of all the dynamics and moving pieces. So I love that part too.
Yeah.
And just before we move on, just to touch on one thing that you mentioned was having a mentor, the CRA that guided you not only on that specific protocol, but then in general, in life, how important, and you kind of did touch on this, saying that you felt like, this person, was really a key component to your career, your success, but kind of elaborate on that a little bit more, just because I want people to see really how much is involved when it comes to having a successful career. It's not just submit an application, show up, where's my paycheck, right? It's a lot that goes into it. And now I'm seeing when you say you kind of just got the role, you didn't realize what you were doing,
right?
You didn't have like a written plan, but every move that you've made is like literally what I would advise people to do.
Right. So I think connections are huge in life in general, whether it's this industry, but I think especially because of this industry, because we're working with a new thing and we're putting it into human beings or doing it to human beings. And so it's going to be extra protected. And so they got to be able to trust you. And so right now they're just trusting this piece of paper, but they don't know if they trust the words on that piece of paper. And so for me, I think I was just an open book, a sponge. And she knew that my original goal was to go into to be a practitioner of some sorts. And I kind of felt like this program that I had completed led me to here. And so she just felt like she wanted to elevate me and take my career to whatever that would be. And so again, like it wasn't these just protocol specific things, but it was just this is what you can do down the line. But I would ask her all of those questions. So it wasn't just her feeding it to me unsolicited. I would ask the questions. I had other mentors that I would ask questions to because I wanted to be a trainer. So I was like a junior trainer in only my second year as a CRC. And I learned a lot from that because I worked with all these different departments. And so I quickly realized the importance of making good connections with people and in the workplace and outside, meaning our external vendors, our CRCs, and other people that would come on site. And back then, business cards were super popular. And we didn't have LinkedIn. I had my Rolodex and I had my business cards and I would collect them. And that's like how I would connect with people. And one thing that I always did too was at investigator meetings, I would try to meet my CRA or meet all the CRAs because sometimes they would cover for each other. And I would also try to find other sites that were similar in demographic as mine. So if I was at an academic institution, I'd look at other academic institutions because I knew right away recruitment was a big deal. If we had no recruitment, we had no patients, we had no study, and we might not have a job, right? And so I quickly learned that the power of networking and staying connected was super impactful. And I remember starting like a study coordinator monthly call because it was so helpful to hear how other people did their advertising and how they could use the funds that the sponsor gave them. And so I think I quickly understood as much as my mentor helped me, I could mentor others and we could collaborate from site to site. And this is within one protocol, right? We belong to a consortium. And so then there were all these like baby protocols that were investigator initiated that kind of grew into one thing or another. And so over the years, I've just really harnessed the power of not only being coached, but being the coach and helping others move along in their path. I really believe in the power of paying it forward. I feel like I can't just take, and I want others to have the joy that I have, the success that I have in my career. I'm really proud of what I do. I'm really proud of what's been advanced in this field. There's been so many great things that have happened. I've even been on a trial, Jasmine, where this was an awesome compound. We got it to market and it was like a 5-year trial and we ran it for 7 years. And then 5 years later, I was literally doing a study determining if it should be taken off the market. And I remember thinking, this is the craziest thing I've ever done. Let's put it on. Now let's take it off. And, wow. Right. And so I think that's why we do research, though, because the first time around it was like, 5 years, what are the outcomes? But we didn't look beyond that. And so beyond 10 years, like there was all this bad stuff happening. And so it was good for us to know that as a research community, as a global society. So
wow. Wow. That's pretty cool, though, to help get it on. And then you might have to help take that off.
Ironic.
Wow. But no, you mentioned so many great things. Like I said, you didn't realize it at the time, but you were literally doing everything. If you were intentionally trying to be strategic, that I would have advised somebody to take. You being open to being coached, you asking questions, staying on top of things, networking, connecting. A lot of people go to these meetings and they're just there so they can, say they were there and then they leave.
Yep.
But you were actually networking and connecting and, you figured out that recruitment was a key. Like all of these things are key. And it's wow. for you to intuitively already, know and be doing those things, that's amazing.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I always tease because I feel like LinkedIn should have been invented so much sooner. But I really like it. I mean, I think it's an amazing tool. And to see, like I said, when you're only used to thinking the world exists only in the United States, and you realize, oh, there's a bigger world out there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of smart people in the world. And why not be efficient and collaborate and come together? And it's just incredible, the people I've met through LinkedIn and other channels, like you say, between the investigator meetings, SOCRA and ACRP annual conferences. I mean, any opportunity I have, I try to make sure I get outside of my comfort zone, because I get it. It's hard to go to a meeting and tell yourself to make a new friend. It's way easier to sit in the same chair in the same spot the whole entire conference.
Yeah.
So, but I think it'll just pay off so much more professionally.
Absolutely.
And it kind of leaks into the personal life, right? It just makes life so much better and easier.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that too, that it's not easy. Maybe for some of those super, social gregarious people that are just like, that's what they live for. But for most people, it is challenging. But if you put yourself out there, it definitely makes a huge difference. And ultimately it makes it a little bit easier too, because now you have people that you can go to and lean on. You have resources. So, I think that, wow, that's amazing. that is so amazing. So, back to your journey, we left off with, you land in the CRA role. Did you actually apply, or did someone come to you and approach you and say, hey, are you interested in being a CRA?
So I had applied for this particular role. It was the unique CRO because it was an academic CRO. So the funds that they get are through fundraising, through different patient advocacy groups and other types of advocacy groups and investigator groups. And I just felt like just their mission was something that really spoke to me in the neurology space. And so, and I had heard through the grapevine, like they didn't travel as much, because I knew that I would like the role. But I wasn't interested because, again, I have like 4 kids, and my youngest.
I just have to add this. I think it's so amazing that you have 4 kids.
It's kind of crazy.
It is, because you did all of this. We didn't talk about it, but you did all of this. And like you were basically running a daycare at the same time.
I know, isn't that crazy? And I really did work like 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. because I wanted to be a mom. And I think I didn't know I wanted to be a mom until I became one. And I really wanted to stay with them while they were really young. And so it was when my youngest went to kindergarten, I was like, okay, now I'm ready to like jumpstart back into my career, like full force. Cause I always felt like it was just kind of like part-time, which was by intention, but I just kind of thought, I know I can do so much more. And so that's why I had applied. And it was like I said, an academic CRO, kind of the aims and the goals were very different than like a traditional CRO. But like oftentimes CROs are they're at the will of the sponsors. And so our sponsors, some things had happened on sites and travel had to change. And I just remember thinking, I love this job, but I just can't travel so much with my kids.
Yeah.
And so the hardest thing for me was the travel. And again, small academic CRO. And so my region was coast to coast, not Hawaii, but coast to coast. So coming from out of Arizona, I had to leave Sunday afternoon to be able to start work on Monday morning on the East Coast. And so I'm the kind of person like I take my job very seriously.
Yes.
So I want to do a good job, and so I'll be there. And so I just found myself, flying out Sunday, and then like I didn't realize, and it's nobody's fault, it's the airline's fault, but I would be stranded in a city because there was too much traffic in the air. And so some flights were canceled and some were delayed. But the general story is that I wouldn't get home till Saturday just to turn around to travel on Sunday. So that got really, really difficult for my family. And so I had a really good heart-to-heart talk with my manager, and we both just kind of shed tears on like, how could we make this work? And really, we couldn't figure out a way. And I had an opportunity to kind of go into education and try to figure things out. and then went back to being a CRA role, but at a hospital locally in Phoenix. And so it was kind of this in-house CRA. Love that position. And that was just also I had applied to it, but it was one of those. So again, I'm a blabber. So sometimes I just meet people and talk to them, right? And so at one of my SOCRA meetings, I just mentioned, like, I really want to go back to being a CRA, but I don't really know how to do that without all the travel. And out here, in-house is not really a thing. And the pandemic has made that more of a thing.
Yeah.
But before the pandemic, in-house CRA, you really had to go to an office. And especially if you live out where I am at, there really aren't very many offices to even go to. And so one of my friends slash, colleagues within the research area within SOCRA, she just said, you should apply for this position because we're looking to start this program that's kind of internal monitoring and kind of best practices, quality management. And I was like, tell me more. And so I met this person at a SOCRA chapter meeting. She was already interviewing me in the middle of this chapter meeting just to get to know me and, get a feel for me. So by the time that I did apply, she already had an idea who I was, what I was about. She had heard me run this meeting. And so I didn't know that. And I think sometimes you don't know that until you just put yourself out there.
Right.
And so, I worked in that position for a couple of years, and then I got pulled away to what I'm currently doing now, which is a clinical scientist. And so I don't think I would have left that job, Jasmine, had I not been pulled away by this incredible opportunity, because I love the job that much, because it was an opportunity to do exactly what a CRA does, which is to, not just SDV, but to look at big picture, how they can do their job better, preserving that patient safety, preserving that data, validity, integrity. And it was just such a fun job and really great people to work with. And so I didn't think I'd ever leave it, because when I had interviewed, I said, this will be my job for the next 20 years. And so it was only 2 years, which, again, pandemic, the perfect stars aligning. I know that I'm where I'm supposed to be. I'm learning so much in what I do right now. It's a medical monitoring position that looks at the global scale of things through statistics. And I work with CRAs all day. So, and sites. So. Wow.
You've just said so much.
I did. Sorry.
No. And I like to take notes throughout now. I've learned my lesson. So I can make sure that I, kind of touch back on the major points. But going back to the travel, yes. I want to bring that back up just because, there's so many people that say, I want to be a CRA. And most of the time it's because of money. Right. And they feel like that's the quickest, fastest, easiest way to get to, the higher salary. And then there's the travel. And they think, oh, it's just going to be fun. And, I get to go to, how it is, I get to go to these different cities and I get to get points and the perks and all that stuff. But I'm so glad that you mentioned the challenges with it, because a lot of people don't talk about that. And it really is a burden, even if for you, I can imagine, because you were a national
CRA.
Yes, you were not regional. You were truly national. Right. But even if you're regional, it's still challenging, especially if you aren't in a city with a hub airport. Because for me, I still have a lot of connections. So if I have to connect, what might be a direct 2-hour flight will turn into an 8 or 9 hour day trip. Yep. And God forbid there's, like you said, a cancellation, a delay, then that adds on even more hours. And people don't think about that. And I've been there where you were, where I had to leave on Sunday, get back on Friday, or if there's a delay, cancellation, whatever, get back on Saturday, leave back out on Sunday. Yep. And it's rough. Even if you don't have kids, even if you don't have a family, it's still rough, right? Yeah. But you throw all that stuff in there and it takes a toll.
I think I can. And I'm that kind of person that I don't want to misuse or be dishonest in the expectations of my employer, right? If they expect me to go on site to spend 2 days, I'm going to spend 2 days. If there's no work for me to do, and I don't know how that would happen as a CRA, I've never run into that. I would be there for 2 days. And so, and and there's always so much to do. And so for me, I think the easiest part was interacting with the site and teaching them how they could do better, just because I had been a coordinator, I had been a manager, I had owned this company. And so I found that to be the easiest part of my job, is to teach them how to be better. But again, it was the hardest with the travel and hard to manage, because there was like just a lot of reports that had to be done. And we were, like I said, we were a small CRO. So there were a lot of demands that we didn't push back on, where some larger CROs, they can push back, they can get the proper compensation, so then they can hire on more people. And we just didn't really have that luxury. And so for me, I just kind of felt like I can't do this, and I wish that I could. And my manager wanted me to too as well. But we both realized it was better to just, cut our losses, and maybe in the future we might meet up again. And who knows, like maybe we will. So I think that when people think about that, like you said, they look at the salary and they think it's just all fun and games. But yeah, some of those are really brutal, because if it happens earlier in your week and you're planning 3 trips, that's going to set you behind and it'll affect the entire month.
Yeah. So, everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Very hard to reset.
Yeah. Almost impossible, right? Mm-hmm. Because the work just piles up. It doesn't go away. It's not like you have an assistant.
Right.
That can help you. So yeah. And then one of the things you mentioned was that you put yourself out there. And that's another thing. I know I talked to you earlier about fear and, being scared to do things, but you have to put yourself out there in spite of, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when you drill down to it, I think we're all afraid to some degree. And it just takes that one person to make that first move. And then everyone starts feeling like, well, I can be brave too. Yeah. And I think that that's when you realize, so like I had mentioned, reaching out to other sites and, can I have your business card? And maybe we, talk to each other about recruitment, because I just don't know how I'm going to recruit for this group of people. And, oh yeah, that's a good idea. And then you'd have someone who kind of overheard it and, hey, I want to be part of this. And, and so like, if I didn't start that, would that have ever happened, And so I realized, like, I think we're all thinking it. I was just the one who opened my mouth.
Yeah. And that's amazing, because that makes a huge difference. One small question, one small comment can literally be the difference between, recruiting 10 patients or none, or get in the position, or, not even an interview. Like literally that one thing can make a huge difference.
Yeah, exactly. And then being able to read people, I think, is another key thing. You and I mentioned, like, in person, there's so much more you can do and see, between the body language and kind of the vibe you get in the room. But I think I have those feelers on me work pretty good. And so I was able to understand, like, maybe this is not the time to ask that question. Maybe it should be more of a one-on-one question. And so I think I know there's sometimes a difference between East Coast and West Coast. West Coast tends to be more casual and things like that. So, and I've understood that over the years, they like to be, greetings in this way and different emails phrased that way. And so it's good to learn those things. And I wouldn't have learned it had I not just paid attention to just other people asking questions. And so just being aware of your surroundings is huge. So
true. And that I'm glad you added that point. I always tell my daughter that, just because it's true and just because you're thinking it doesn't mean you can say it.
Right. Might not be received just well.
So that's a great point, though. You being, aware. And then you go, just having so much attention to detail, which is kind of a requirement, not just as a CRA, but really any role in the industry. You have to, that has to be one of your qualities to even make it.
I'm glad you picked up on that. I have attention to detail. I think it's a syndrome of some sort, because sometimes I'm like, I wish I didn't see that, but so I'm looking for consistency. So I'll see like a bullet point. I'm like, some of them have periods and the others don't. And I'm like, oh, why did I see that?
No, I'm the same way. And it's like, literally, I always say that hurts my eye. Like, you have to fix that.
And so people, as much as some people hate it, some people love it. And they're like, that's why you're here, and I'm like, okay, I'll take that. Yes. And so I tell people who are less attentive to detail. So I can tease about my husband because he's not. He's like, that's why I married you. So you can take care of all the details. And so he has a vision of what we're going to be doing on vacation, and I put it into action and how it's all going to fit together. And so that's why it works. And I think we need both, right? We need those that have that bigger picture, and then others that are all about the details.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's right. You have to have different players to make up the team. If we're all doing the same thing, like, who's going to see each other's blind spots? So that's
right.
That's important too. And so back into your story with the research scientist role, I think that sounds like a really, really cool role. And talk more about that, because you have people that they are CRA now and they want to get out, but they don't know. They don't know where to go. And
one reason or another. Yeah. So I've met actually several CRAs who have become scientists because so one reason was because of the travel. They've liked the pandemic allowing the opportunity to not travel as much. And now that things are opening back up, they're realizing, I don't want to go back to traveling all that much now. And so on a daily basis, I am looking at recruitment and enrollment all along the different visits in several studies. And so when you look in that protocol, there's typically safety outcomes and endpoints, and then there's like efficacy. So my role right now is specifically on safety. And so I look at exactly if it's those labs, those assessments within EKGs, some spirometry, different assessments on each protocol. And so every day I'm looking for those. So whether I'm looking into the IVRS for the IP being distributed, so I know a visit occurred, I'm looking at those outcomes. Where are we at now? Because like I said, it's not so much one single site. And that's why this job really was so exciting to me and enticing. I felt like I could have a bigger global imprint with my skill set, rather than just having this narrow, it's all about Phoenix and only about Phoenix, Arizona. I could see that this was going to help a lot of people. And the sponsor I work for, it works in the rare disease space, which, is kind of like a hot topic right now. I've been in long enough to see the different time periods of different research, and rare disease is the hot topic right now, and what there's a lot of attention to. Yeah. And so there's the opportunity for precision medicine. And so they're looking at safety first and then efficacy. So we have a different team for efficacy. Some of my colleagues do both the safety and efficacy. Most of them don't. They do one or the other. And then the other role that I have is clinical development. And so a lot of phase one that I didn't have a lot of experience with. I have worked in phase one where it's kind of the healthy volunteers testing something new to see what happens. But most of my phase one has been in cancer. And so we know it's chemo, so we can't put it in healthy people. Yeah. But we're going to put it into people who are sick that we think it could work, right? Whereas these phase ones, like I said, it's more that precision medicine. It's down to, because we're in that time frame in the 2020s, we're looking at DNA and we're looking at specific biomarkers. And so it really is hitting the treatment right where it needs to be. And so to be on that ground level of seeing the science for it, I am nerding out so much because in college, I didn't love my science classes. I knew I was good at it, but to be here now, to actually see it in application, oh my goodness, it is so cool to see how it's working. It is amazing to see how it's working in real life, so all those compounds and organic chemistry, it's really coming full circle for me. I think that's super exciting. I think because I'm still somewhat new in that role, I don't get to do as much in it, but I know that's something I get to look forward to. So within the clinical scientist space, there's a lot of different levels of what you can do. And so for that, I'm super excited when I get to that role, because I don't think my eyes are set on that with the clinical development and the protocol writing. For me, that's super exciting. And I hope that, CRAs are thinking about, what's my next move. I think it's a fantastic, and it's a pretty easy move. What I haven't mentioned on the practical aspects is maybe I'm expecting, 20 visits to occur tomorrow around the globe. And by the end of the week, it still hasn't happened. These visits could be out of window. They may be out of IP. And so my role is to contact first the CRAs and let them know, like, this has happened. So you might want to reach out to the sites. And so it's a collaborative effort. So it depends on the CRA. If they're on the road, they may not have the time to be managing other sites that need to attend to those visits. So then I would reach out to the sites on their behalf. And then some of them would rather that I not talk to their sites. They want to handle it. They got it. Right. I would say most of them appreciate that extra help with reaching out to their sites. And so I think that's kind of a great way to interact with the sites. So it's like a 50-50. I would say maybe closer to 75-25. Most of them would prefer that I help them, but there is that small portion.
I would be one of those. Yes.
Yeah.
Any help I can get, please.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be a role to look out for, I think, as more, because this industry is kind of exploding right now.
It is. And I was thinking before you just, explained it and described it in detail that it was more like the MSL role. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but it sounds really cool because it's, like you said, precision medicine is like this thing now. And back when I was in graduate school, one of my classes was pharmacogenomics. So looking at the different genes and all the, different factors that might make this drug work better for this patient or that patient, or, hit it with a different combination. I always thought that was cool. But the application in real life was one of the challenges. So to see it now come into fruition, and it's cool, right?
Yeah, it makes it so worthwhile. And the sponsor that I have a couple of weeks ago showcased this patient who had been given an IP and had been on it, and then it got approved and has been on it for 10 years. And I think the total time is 12 years for this patient. And things are so good for this patient. And to see when he was like such a young kid, and then now he's this young man, like it, you just know that his life was changed for the better, and
wow.
And the community around him, and that's when it really hits home. Like, I am doing such a good thing for humanity, and I think we all want to do that.
Yeah,
and especially in these rare diseases when it's just so hard to find anything that will stick. They oftentimes don't have any place to start.
Yeah,
but the fact that they've gotten there is just really, really incredible. So
wow.
I work with a bunch of smart people. I mean, really smart people.
Wow. And you're obviously one of those people. You're on the team. And one thing that I did want to ask, just for the people who are interested, and maybe I'll be one of those people, who knows, but in terms of the requirements to be a clinical scientist, is there any specific degree requirements, experience requirements that they're looking for?
So the application I had applied for said 5 to 7 years of experience in clinical research.
Okay.
A master's degree was preferred. And then when I got to the interview, they were really asking about my ability to take apart a protocol and then put it back together again because of clinical development, right? So just being able to understand how to write one up, not just for it, because I have had that hands on little side gigs here and there from a site perspective on how to execute it, how feasible is it for the site, but not a role where big global scheme. So you have to think, this will work in the US, but it won't work in Europe. It won't work in Japan because their healthcare system works differently and their government works very differently as far as their healthcare, right? And so the opportunities are very different. They're not better or worse, they're just very different. And so in this role, we have to write a protocol that speaks to all of them because it should be one protocol. And then they had asked about my hard skills, my technical skills with spreadsheets. So I thought I knew Excel well. Like, I've learned so much within Excel and all sorts of programming with, graphs and charts and some proprietary software that they use because it's all about publication and about kind of coming up with results for good and for bad, right? Because again, it goes back to we're trying to find an answer and we want to be big grown-ups and understand this didn't work. So how can we make it better, or where do we improve? And I think it's amazing. The sponsor I have is, like I said, they're really big and they're also global. So I love the diversity in my coworkers because they understand where they live, how government runs healthcare in their countries and in their regions. So I've been learning a lot about that. I'm trying to think what other skill sets I've had to use. I think it also goes back to kind of those soft skills with people. I'm the person who wants to get to know all the team players on my team. And I know so I work remotely. There's no office I report to except my bedroom. And so I miss that in-person interaction with my coworkers. And so how I do that is I will kind of have a one-on-one with some of my coworkers because I want to know where they were coming from, how they got here. And it's just been neat to kind of see what motivates them and how they got there. And so having said that, I feel like I can make this work better, if I understand what's important to them and they understand what's important to me. And I think that's just always been a part of who I am. So just to know who the players are.
Wow. And so there's no travel.
There's no travel. They did say that whenever this pandemic would be lifted, we might travel 10%. That's not
that CRA travel where it's every week.
Yeah, every single week. Yeah. And to be fair, that they really planned it so that it would be 40%. But like I said, sometimes things happen. And so it's a period of time where it's 3 months heavy, and then they could be 3 months, no travel at all. But it's very unpredictable. Whereas this role, they just kind of said if we were to travel, it would be investigator meetings. But
just here and there. It's not a part of the job where you're traveling. Okay.
Correct.
Wow, that's really good to know. That is, because like I said, I was thinking it was going to be more so along the lines of an MSL. So that's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And then to know that there's also different levels within that space that you can still, reach. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, there's so many things. And like I said, it's very, a lot of CRAs have been coming over because they see that as such a natural fit into what they were doing. Because we're looking at data all the time, all day, every day, at the different assessments. And then, like I said, there's kind of the reporting aspect and the potential for publication or to kind of collaborate in that piece. And so, so for that, I think that's super flexible too. As far as scheduling, I don't need it as much as when I was a young mother. But I find myself with teenagers that, man, sometimes it's really nice to have that flexibility because I can get all my work done. And then in the evenings and afternoons, attend to being a mom and being good for them when they need that. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, I might have to ask you some more questions later. That's really cool. And so that's not the only hat that you wear. Like you said, you're an instructor for Fast Track.
Yeah.
Has a really great clinical research training program for people that are looking for the foundational education. And then also SOCRA. So, right. Share with us how you're able to juggle all these things. Because, you talked about me, but, you have the daycare, plus you have
That's true.
Your main job. I mean, you have all these things. You're a wife. I mean, how are you able to do it? And then also, just what I guess encouraged you outside of you mentioned you like to give back. But how were you able to get become a part of these other roles as well?
So, I have had migraines since I was 10 years old. And so one of the reasons for wanting to go into medicine was to find something that would help myself. So very self-serving. So many of my friends, physicians, people would say, take this medication, it works. And it wouldn't work. And I would question, like, why doesn't it work for me when it works for all these other people? Like, why am I the weird one, And I remember in college, I took a class and it kind of spoke to pharmacogenomics. And that's when I really was like, okay, so it is me because of my DNA, but it's not me because the research hasn't been done. And I realized there's something here. And so it was kind of a natural fit that I went into the pharmacy technician, just because it was good money when you're like 16 years old, so you're not making minimum wage. And it was still kind of like healthcare related. And it was when I had that PI who was encouraging me to get a degree in research and to stay in research and make a career out of it, that I realized that there was a lot of gaps within research. And it just is what it is, the history of research in the world. And I just found that it was just, it needed more diversity. Our patients didn't want to talk to someone they couldn't relate to. Somehow I was able to relate to patients in our clinics just because of what I look like. A funny off story is I had to run a study on erectile dysfunction. 20-something-year-old female, not the best person to be coordinating that study. And my PI knew it, but his hands were tied, right? And so I share that because I think it's really critical to have the people, if you really want patients to be in your research, you have to have staff and you have to have talent to be able to meet those patients.
Yeah.
And so very quickly, I learned that there was a gap between race and gender, and the trust and the patients that would come in as a result. It would be slow. And I kind of thought, I've got to find a way where I can touch people, teach people, and let them know they need to get into this field so that this is how medicine can truly move forward. Mm-hmm. And so whether it was, like I said, I believe that everything happens for a reason. So when I worked at Fast Track, I wasn't just any old teacher, but I was a director for them for a couple of years. And very quickly, I realized that there's a huge disparity for international medical graduates. When they moved to the U.S., they were a physician in their country, but they're not a physician here.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I understand it, it's very rigorous in the US so anyway, so it's a bottleneck. And I just met all these people from all these different countries. Like, I think I know that there's all these different races, but boy, I met so many people from so many different countries and still do. And it just like my heart swells when I meet these people because I know their hearts and their intents. They were treating patients, and then they come here, now they can't. So they see research as an opportunity, and I see them as a face for research. And again, moving forward, diversity in research. And I know it right now, it's really like a hot topic right now in general, but I've always had that way back, like even in 2000, that there was this gap that I saw. Because I just happened to notice, like, these people aren't getting the same outcomes as what I'm seeing over here with these other patients, just based on race, and I hope that, and so that's my main driving force. How do I manage? I think just kind of what you said earlier, you just do it. It might be overwhelming sometimes, but you just kind of plan it out. And even if you have to plan it out into the future, several months out, I just make it happen. I make it a priority. And one thing I would say I'm pretty decent at is delegating. So as far as like the SOCRA role, so I'm a senior chapter chairperson for Phoenix, and I have an incredible team of 4 people who support this organization. So we've got our tech person who kind of runs all of that and the Zoom stuff for the link for people. We have one person who sends out all the certificates, one person who's helping me like secure speakers, one who's kind of a catch-all to do other things. And so it's just kind of, I think it's really key to find people who want to do something, because I think they all want to do it, but they don't have the bandwidth. Like, I don't have the bandwidth if you told me to do it just by myself. I do have friends that do it all by themselves, and I just kind of think it's so much better when you have a team, It's so much better. Right now, I'm not a director for Fast Track, but I am an instructor. I'm passionate about it because, like I said, it's an opportunity for people who are trained medical professionals to get into this field. But it's also a great opportunity for kind of like what you're speaking, these new grads, they want to use their science degree. Where can they take it? It's a really good practical way of learning GCP. It's a great practical way of learning how to consent.
Yeah.
And so that's why I've stayed, because they make time for me. I make time for them.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to sacrifice PTO. That's the other way I have to do it, is take that sacrifice and take some PTO and get it done. But I think it's worthwhile. So.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, no, I'm just shocked. Like all the things that you've done, all the things that you're still doing. It's just amazing to see you, and you're still going. Like your story's just beginning.
I feel like it really is. I feel like it's blown up, Jasmine, because I feel like, I can tell you. So here's a funny story too. In June of 2020, my dad called me up and he's like, I get it now. And I was like, what do you get? And he was like, I get what you do for work. And I never understood what I did for work. He watched some video that the city sent out about the vaccines coming out. And he was like, I get it. Because he kind of thought, well, maybe you're a pharmaceutical rep. And I was like, I'm not a pharmaceutical rep. And he just kind of thought, well, maybe you're this, maybe you're that. He never fully understood, as much as I would tell him. Right. And so because of this little video that he watched, he was like, I get it now. And I was like, people don't get it. But I would say in the last 2 years, more people have gotten it than the prior 19 years that I've been in this industry, because they don't know. And I don't expect them to, but I think the next 20 plus years, we are going to see so many great changes within the industry. And like I said, the different roles that are going to be popping up to support, sites and sponsors. I think that the kinds of research that we do globally are going to change, because we need that racial and diverse equity that has been lacking for so long. I'm excited. I think it's going to be so fun to see all these countries that were never on the map in research to finally be on the map and have representation.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I was laughing at your story because my family still doesn't understand. They, at this point, I think all of them literally think I'm still at the bench doing experiments in a lab coat. And I know I've told them, they ask me every time they see me pretty much. And it's no, that's, I don't see patients. I don't do experiments. I just gave up.
I know you do.
Maybe one day they'll see that commercial or a similar commercial and they'll understand. But it's so funny because it's so true. It's most people don't get it. They don't even know that it's this whole world out there. Especially when you're in school, going back to what we said before, you're either going to be a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, or lawyer. Right. But you don't know all these other roles, this whole world that's out there.
Yeah, that's so true. I'll have to find that video that my dad watched and send it to you.
Yes, please. It's just so sad. I've literally given up. And then my brother jokes, he's like, you work for a secret government agency. And I'm like, no.
My sister has said that.
You can Google it.
That's great. And then especially when he's I think my husband heard me, I was teaching just an introductory class on just the acronyms. And he was just like, it really is a different language. It's just, you're throwing out random letters there.
It really is. And it's hard to get that point across to people that are like, oh, I'm in the medical field, I'll be fine.
Right.
And it's no. And then even within each company, sometimes they throw in their own acronym.
Yes, they do. Absolutely. Every sponsor has their own dictionary of acronyms, and it's okay. Yeah, I've learned so much with my current role. I'm like, oh, that's what that is. So
yeah, as if they couldn't make it any more complicated, right?
Right.
But that's funny. You said you had the whole class on it. And people think that no, it's just, I just need a list. just this and I'll be fine. No, this literally is a new language.
Yeah, it's a new language. There's the application of that language and the context,
That's
right?
another thing.
So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Because a CTA could be a clinical trial assistant, or it could be an agreement, a contract. So
right.
so many, right? So many different
Yeah.
things. That's another good point, the application.
Yeah.
So I know I've kept you a really long time today. I don't want to keep you away from your family any longer, but I've loved speaking with you. Like I said, you just have so much information, so much knowledge to share. So any last words that you would like to leave to the people that are, aspiring to be a CRA, or maybe they're thinking about it, but they don't quite, know if they should even get into it, or for the people that do know, how, any words of encouragement or a tip for them to kind of reach that goal. And then the people that are CRAs that are, struggling, trying to figure out what else they can do, how else can they, continue to grow in the industry, get off the road, what other roles are out there, without having to necessarily sacrifice income, because that's the big thing that I get, right? If I get off the road, I'm going to have to take a huge pay cut. So what would be your final thoughts for those two groups?
So the number one thing is to get a mentor, to have a good coach, having a good network of people. And oftentimes, if you're willing to seek a coach or seek a mentor out, know that you should also be a mentor or a coach down the line for someone else. Because I think, especially in this industry, because it is a very niche market that people don't know about, it's a small it's a big community, but it's a small community. Yeah. And so I think just paying it forward is super important. Keeping your eyes and ears open. For me, SOCR is a big deal for me just because I've made such great friends, in my career through that organization, whether annual conference or offline. I think just networking with people in that group. Some people just have the membership and that's it, or, they're certified and that's it. But it can be so much more, that networking aspect of it. And by having that, and you're ready to move into a CRA role or to move out of a CRA role, you can speak to people about that, right? So I came from a site background where I managed sites. I was an owner of this consulting firm. And so for me, a CRA was kind of a natural route because I was looking for quality. So I would kind of spot check what was going in to our source to make sure that they were clean. And so, yeah, the CRAs liked it, but it was also kind of making sure that my staff was trained and qualified. And so I think that being a CRA role is a great fit, even if sites if they have staff that don't ever want to go into the industry per se. I see a lot of large organizations having a quality management program, and it's very similar to the SDV, but it also speaks to that quality of what they produce as a deliverable, and it can also speak volumes for their internal investigator trials. So I think the last thing I would say is to be inquisitive, right? So maybe you're shy and you don't really want a coach or a mentor, but be inquisitive and kind of seek out what it is that you could advance next to. Because, maybe it's not clinical scientist. There's a little bias coming from me because I love what I do right now. But I know there's so many other roles that exist. And so if you're not curious and you don't take the initiative to kind of learn more about the different roles in a company, you're never going to be able to move out from under you until you are curious and take some action. So, but it does take some courage, like we had talked about. Just a little bit goes a long way. And so I think that's it.
Wow. Great advice. And, and if for the people that want to get in touch with you, reach out to you, stay connected, where can they find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn and I pretty much accept almost every request. I'm not there to date. I'm not there to buy financial services. I really am there for research, for networking, and to make good connections, right? For myself and for those around me. And like I said earlier, it's a global industry that we work in. And so for that, I'm super proud of that. Don't waste my time. I won't waste yours. So LinkedIn is a very powerful tool. It absolutely is. And so it kind of goes back to, mentoring, coaching, and then being inquisitive. You'll find a lot of information from LinkedIn.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Well, thank you so much, Jeannie, for joining me here today. I appreciate you. I have enjoyed our time together, and I've learned so much from you. So I'm pretty sure the audience did too. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you.